Welcome to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're with us for this half hour. We're going to be speaking with three individuals that will help us make it through some difficult times. The first individual is Rodger Maggio, and what's difficult? It's warm. It's hot summer months, and we're talking about fire season and keeping ourselves safe throughout the warm months. Then we'll be speaking with Steve Gesell. Mr. Gesell is the police chief of San Luis Obispo, and we'll be speaking about how to keep yourself safe and your neighborhood safe with a new technology that sends you text messages. And then finally, we'll be focusing on economic health with an economics professor from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. But first, we speak with Rodger Maggio. He is the fire marshal for the city of San Luis Obispo, but the knowledge he provides us applies throughout the state of California. Sir, before we start, I want to get a sense, what's the difference between the fire chief and the fire marshal?
The fire chief is responsible for the overall functioning of the fire department, both emergency response, fire prevention, training, and administration. And then some of those duties are then delegated to middle management, such as myself as the fire marshal.
You're not middle management. You're top of the heap if you ask me, but be that as it may.
We try.
Right.
But I'm in charge of the Fire Prevention Bureau, which handles annual fire inspection programs for the city, fire investigations, public education, construction management, and vegetation management.
And let's focus on fire prevention, because in so many parts of the beautiful state of California, it's fire country. I mean, the whole state is fire country in so many ways. And you have provided us with some very useful information about what a fire environment looks like, and then tips to try to prevent fires in our own communities. Basically, you described for us there are three components of a perfect fire environment.
Correct.
What are those three components?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. We are living in a fire environment, and the fires have been occurring here in California since California was.
Right.
Before man was here, before we built homes in this environment. Right. We have been excluding fire for the last 100 years, which allowed vegetation to grow thicker and denser and add up for the fuels that the fire feeds on. But the three components for wildfire are fuel, weather, and topography.
So fuel, which is what you just described, it's the dry, dense vegetation.
We have dry, dead fuels, and we have live growing fuels. And the combustibility of those live growing fuels have a lot to do with the weather. And the rainy season before, whether we had a lot or we didn't, contribute to what the fuel moisture content is during the fire season months.
Is it safe to presume that a wetter winter will decrease the chance of a terrible fire season?
Well, it's a two-sided sword on that. Where we have more water, we're going to have more vegetation growth. Right. So we may have more flashy fuels that year, but the fuel moisture in the heavier fuels is higher, and therefore slowing down the progression of fire.
What about topography, the third point?
Topography is very important, as the three components that make fire burn or spread fire, the conduction, convection, and radiation, are all there on an uphill slope where you have preheating of the fuels. And so the fire is going to burn 17 times faster going uphill. Why?
It seems counterintuitive.
Well, as we talked about the convection and the radiation and the conduction, all three of those are in play when you're talking on an uphill. If you look at a match burning, if you hold a match upright, you have just a conductive heat burning the wood down. When you turn it on its side, you're getting the radiant heat preheating those fuels. Now when you turn it so you have the unburnt fuel upslope of that flame, you're going to get now the convective column preheating more fuels. So that's good. The more the fuel is preheated, the faster that fire is going to progress.
I want to talk to you about what we can do. I mean, because literally there are things that each individual home, each individual family can do to create what you call a defensible space.
Right.
Please.
So when we talked about the three components, the fuel, weather, and topography, we can't control the weather and we can't control the topography. What we can do is modify the fuel, especially those that's in a 30-foot lean, clean, and green zone around our homes.
Be specific.
Okay, the lean, clean, and green zone is this 30-foot area around the home where we want to have live growing vegetation that is not resinous, such
as
that mean? You don't want to put a lot of pine trees or cypress or especially junipers who have a lot of resin and sap in them, which burn with a lot of heat and a lot of intensity. Mm-hmm. Likewise, you also want to clean your dead fuels away, make sure you don't have any dead leaves or pine needles on the roof, make sure branches aren't overhanging your roof or overhanging your chimneys, and space your plants apart so you don't have create what we call a ladder effect, where fire will go from grass to brush to trees into the home.
You have brought us 3 photographs. We'll call them the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Correct.
We'll start with good. What is in this photograph that is good?
So what you'll see in a good landscaping scenario is in that lean, clean, and green zone, it's sparse vegetation, all fire-wise landscaping, spaced apart. All the dead and dying material has been removed in that area immediately around the house. In the next 70 feet or more, depending on if you're upslope or on an even terrain, you then modify the native fuels, such as mowing the grass annually to a height of no more than 4 inches. And it's important to note when you were doing mowing or weed eating that during fire season, that we do it before 10 a.m. Because of the heat of the day, as the land rises and the heat heats the land, we get winds. And also the fuel starts drying out faster. So a spark from that piece of equipment can start a fire. So you want to do it before 10 a.m.
Let's look at the bad.
And in the bad, again, is unmodified fuels, not using fire-wise landscaping around the house. You might have unprotected wood decks or wood components of your house.
So I have a wood deck. What's a protected wood deck?
Protected wood deck is using large dimension wood or protecting the underside with ignition-resistant material.
I wonder what I have. I don't know.
In fact, that's the other component. Besides the defensible space, you want to have hardened construction. The City of San Luis Obispo just passed in our general plan some elements that would require certain parts of your home being ignition resistant, such as your roof and your eaves and your underfloor areas, because even if you're not immediately adjacent to a wildland area, a wind event can send burning embers up to 1.5 miles inside the city.
What's the ugly?
The ugly is unmanaged vegetation that has actually been ignited, and I believe the picture in question is the Oakland Hills fire, which was quite devastating. You had all the elements for disaster.
And what were those elements?
We had a lot of overgrown vegetation, a lot of eucalyptus and other plants right up against housing. We had combustible exteriors, combustible roofs, narrow roads, few evacuation routes, low water pressure. It was all there, and when that weather event happened and there was ignition, it just took off.
I think about a county like San Luis Obispo, which has beautiful open space, but with open space comes open land, open vegetation. Is there anything that citizens can do to aid in these open space areas, be it in San Luis Obispo or any of the 58 counties? Again,
is this open space environment provides us lots of recreation and aesthetic opportunities, especially in the city of San Luis Obispo, who takes pride in their natural open space areas. If we eliminate ignition sources, not smoking, not having campfires in these areas, that helps us. Those who live adjacent be cognizant of what they're doing on their property that may spread fire to our open space areas. From our standpoint, we look at vegetation management programs. The fire department has been working with our natural resource manager in the past to do management projects within our open space where they abut built environments. And in fact, last year we were successful on the fire safety grant from the Fire Safe Council.
Controlled burns, is that?
We haven't used controlled burns yet, but we have done. Well, it is a very useful tool. We have to do a lot of public outreach when we do a controlled burn. We have to have a lot of resources on hand to make sure it stays a controlled burn. There has some that have gotten away in other places.
Interesting. I mean, in some ways, fire is natural, and like you said, we have stopped fires.
That's right. We had a fire exclusion policy in this country with the Smokey Bear program going way back.
I remember.
And it's got every fire you had to put out. Well, again, fire is a natural occurring element in our environment. And again, it's not a natural disaster when we have a fire. It's a human disaster when we build homes in these areas, and then we have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in fire resources to protect those homes from that wildfire. And in fact, we've lost 14 firefighters in San Luis Obispo County alone since the 1940s fighting wildland fires in this county.
I wanted to thank you so much, Marshal, for joining us. He is Rodger Maggio. He is the fire marshal for the city of San Luis Obispo, keeping us safe from fires. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Steve Gesell. He is the police chief in San Luis Obispo. He is going to talk to us about Nixle, a new technology, texting to your cell phone. I'm Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition.
In terms of lives lost, which wildfire was the deadliest in the state of California? The Esperanza Fire of 2003, the 1970 Laguna Fire, the 1991 Oakland Hills fire, or the 2007 Zika fire. The Oakland Hills fire of 1991 remains the deadliest wildfire in California, with 25 lives lost.
Welcome back to California Edition. Our guest now is Steve Gesell. He is the police chief for San Luis Obispo, the beautiful city of San Luis Obispo. You've been on the job 6-7 months so far. How's it been?
Since January, absolutely. Right. It's been phenomenal. San Luis is my hometown, and glad to be back.
I want to talk to you about a program that was recently adopted by this city, as well as other cities throughout the state and country, and it's called Nixle. Yes. What is Nixle?
Nixle has been around since 2007, and essentially it allows public safety entities to connect with their community directly through web and text messaging.
It's the text messaging that to me sounds the most appealing, the most informative, the most innovative.
Absolutely, and you know, in emergency situations, which is an example that I'll use straight out of the chute, historically we've been really reliant on news media to get our message out, and sometimes, depending on schedules, how long that message takes to get out could be critical.
Or if there's an electrical failure, I mean, unless you have a radio, you're in real shape.
Absolutely, and if you were very fortunate, we were able to use technology called reverse 911, which would call home phones. Well, a lot of people. Go ahead.
Well, do you have reverse 911 in this community?
We have it in the county.
In the county.
Yes, and that, generally speaking, historically has dialed home phone numbers based on the yellow or the white pages. I'm sorry.
But not cell phones.
No.
And there are some homes, like you were going to say before I so rudely cut you off,
no, you're fine, you're fine.
Which people don't have home phones anymore.
Right.
Okay, so what I find most compelling about Nixle, I'm not a paid spokesman by the way, is that you can get very targeted.
Yes.
So you don't have to send a text message to all 50,000 residents of San Luis Obispo. You can focus on, the Los Osos community, whatever it may be.
Yes. And if I could maybe just explain just the general idea of Nixle that's behind it.
And I want to remind our viewers, it's not just in San Luis Obispo County. It's really, or city I should say, it's throughout the state. I mean, not every community, but chances are if you're watching today, your community has Nixle.
It's highly likely. This Nixle's been around since 2007. And what it essentially allows you to do is you go online, you go to www.nixle.com.
Nixle.com.
Right, or you can even text. I think it's
I got it here.
888-777.
Perfect.
And then enter your zip code, and then you will be automatically signed up by the agencies that identify with that zip code. We personally would encourage you to go to the website because it enables the subscriber to really kind of tailor what type of messages you get.
I see.
So, for instance, we at San Luis PD just started this month utilizing Nixle, and generally what we do is we will send out community alerts, which would include all of our media releases. So if someone wanted to get that information, they can get it directly sent. A text message comes to their phone with a hyperlink, or they can get it to their email and they can see the same media release that the press is.
But I would hope that public safety agencies would use this somewhat sparingly, because I mean, I have to admit, if all of a sudden I saw a text message from the police department, I would get a little spooked.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of going to the website, is you can really filter and set up your account to receive only emergency messages. So if we had, for instance, a serious traffic accident, fire where we needed to evacuate, barricade situation.
Have you used it yet, Nixle? I mean, for more serious situations.
In San Luis Obispo, we've only been using it a couple weeks. So you can go.
Oh, congratulations! I didn't realize.
Oh, wait, we're up and running. You can go on our site right now on Nixle, and you can see the past messages that we've been sending out over the past month or so.
Sure. I was reading on the website of Nixle a case study. I don't know if you remember this case study about the child left in the car.
I don't know that one in particular, but I have experience with it.
It was pretty compelling. I mean, basically what it said is that there was an inebriated father who left a child in a car. He was picked up being inebriated. The mother didn't know where the car was because the father had left. And so the father didn't even know where the child was. And they used Nixle, and so someone in the neighborhood got the message and found the car and the child.
You know, Brad, and there's a lot of those success stories, and I can even give you a local example. Last year we had the abduction, stranger abduction of little 5-year-old Jeremy Guthrie in Atascadero. And Nixle was used in the search for that child, which lasted 12 hours. and really was instrumental.
Was that the child care abduction?
Yes.
From a child care center?
It was from a shelter.
A shelter, right. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it was his birth mother?
No, it was another lady that was staying at the shelter.
He was with his birth mother.
He was with his birth mother, and he was abducted by a lady that was an acquaintance at the shelter. And in the search for Jeremy, Nixle was used, and quite frankly, it helped mobilize that entire community, and such a great ending. We were able to get him back.
I want to shift gears and speak about what we know as realignment. The program of realignment essentially gives authority to counties to incarcerate low-level offenders, the three nons: non-sexual, non-violent, non-serious. Now, I know you are with the city. Correct. You are not the county sheriff, you're the police chief of the city. There are some cities, though, Los Angeles, for example, which are being directly impacted by realignment because they are being asked by their county counterpart to handle some of the parole issues, for example, for these low-level offenders that have been released. How is the city of San Luis Obispo interfacing with the county vis-a-vis realignment?
Well, I think we're very fortunate to live.
Oh, bang!
San Luis
Sorry,
Obispo
not in front of a police officer.
Right.
No banging in front of a police officer. Continue.
Good reflexes.
Yes.
We're fortunate that we live in San Luis Obispo County, and I think certainly realignment has impacted other jurisdictions. At this juncture, far greater than our county.
Why?
I think that's a concentration of state inmates that are being moved out of state institutions into county custody, quite frankly. And and again, not being as close to the subject as the sheriff would be, I think the concern for the municipalities is when those state prisoners are moved to our county facilities, there's impacts to the county. There's also impacts to, like you said, in LAPD. They're apparently, according to you, being responsible now for parole and probation, which we have not seen those impacts. But we are seeing a progression of a larger number of parolees and probationers that are directly tied to realignment that conceivably could impact our communities.
But as of today, all is copacetic, at least on the realignment. I mean, the reason I ask you is, I speak with a lot of law enforcement officials up and down the state, and I get a lot of different views on this subject. It can be a very divisive subject. Sure. Some are willing to give realignment a try. Others are hopping mad about it and just wish the whole program would go away. Some believe that having low-level offenders closer to home, they can receive their treatment, whatever that may be, closer to home. They have ties to their community. It should be a net plus. Others think it's just a drain on the financial resources of already severely tapped counties.
And it's a balance. I mean, I think it comes down to what the impacts are for that community. And I think, again, other communities have experienced at this juncture, and we're fairly early on trying to discern what the impacts will be. I think we're doing better at this point than many other communities. Any
uptick in crime since realignment took hold?
Not that I can tie directly to realignment. It's a complex subject, like many others, that influence the crime rates in any given community.
Is it requiring more connection, more collaboration between you as the police chief and Ian Parkinson as the sheriff?
Yes, absolutely. We have phenomenal partnerships in this county, and the partnerships we have with the Sheriff's Department and county probation, because they're a huge component in realignment. And our relationships there are very solid, and that's a great starting point.
Okay. His name is Steve Gesell. He is the police chief of the city of San Luis Obispo. When we come back, we'll be speaking with an economics professor. She can speak with us about the economic health of San Luis Obispo, but more importantly, the entire state and the nation. She is offering tips on what you can do when deciding between two competing offers. What a novel concept that is. But yes, things are getting better after the Great Recession. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on California Edition.
Which state houses the most prisoners per capita? California, Louisiana, New York, or Texas? According to the Times-Picayune, Louisiana hosts the most prisoners per capita in the nation.
Welcome back to California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. I'm glad you're still with us. Our guest is Dawn Chandler. She is an outgoing professor at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. We congratulate her on her new position at Queen's University in North Carolina, where she will be teaching management. But fortunately, she is still here to provide us some outstanding and helpful tips. And what's great about what we're going to talk about today is that people are actually going to be able to use these tips because the economy is getting better.
Exactly.
Is it getting better in your mind?
Yes, and I can say that because my students are getting more and more offers. So they've come to me with the very questions that we're going to be discussing today.
And the question is, what do you do when you are presented with two enticing job offers?
Right.
Amen to that. Who would have thought that after the Great Recession we'd finally have this problem, but we do.
Right.
So
Okay.
let's talk. You have 6 considerations.
Right, and to be sure, there are many, but these are some good ways to think about how to distinguish between the two, or more.
Let's start with number 1,
Okay.
which deals with your proposed career path.
Okay, so there are 2 elements that are similar there. One is the challenge inherent in each job, and accompanying that, the long-term career path,
Right.
because people we know are motivated by the challenge, the learning inherent in the job. So you have to be asking yourself, what are the breadth of responsibilities that I'm going to get in each job? What are the learning opportunities? And then from there, where can I go? And how marketable would I be internally and frankly, externally, based on if you decide to leave?
And it's interesting, I have younger cousins, and so often they'll look at the bottom line, which is the starting salary, and not recognize that that may not be the most important element.
You're so right, and it's true. We know that a lot of people, for example, try to leave companies because of purportedly because of money, but then they take jobs only to get counteroffers from their companies with more money, but then they still leave because it was never about the money. It's about these issues.
So let's talk about the third consideration, which is a dual consideration. That's visibility and autonomy.
Okay.
And it's interesting how you put them together.
Yeah. Well, because one does affect the other.
Right.
So to start with visibility, you want your job to be meaningful to the overall goals of the organization. And you also want your work to be exposable to senior ranking executives who might be your mentors, for example.
I just must interrupt. As you know,
Yes.
I used to be a lawyer.
Yes.
And I was an attorney at a major television studio. I would say my job wasn't important to that company. If you know what I'm saying. I mean, yes, they need lawyers, but what I learned, I had been at a law firm and then I went to a studio, supposedly a very sexy thing to do, but when you're at a law firm, you are the profit center. You are the reason the law firm exists.
Yeah.
When you are the lawyer at a studio, your visibility is low. They don't want to deal with you.
It's a great example. Now I didn't even need to provide one.
See, there you have it. I tried.
So the second piece of that is the autonomy. So you want to have latitude in being able to make decisions that provide you with the visibility in the first place. Because you imagine, if you don't have a lot of latitude in decision making, who's going to care about your work? You can't stretch yourself, so to speak.
I love your fourth consideration. I think it is one that we so often forget to consider, and it is whether you are a cultural fit. And I presume that is a very broad term.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it specifically has to do with the values of the organization and whether those overlap with yours. And you are totally right that it is a key consideration because we know people who don't fit with the culture ultimately become unhappy and leave.
And culture could mean race, religion, sexual orientation. It could even mean political philosophy. I mean, even if you're at an organization that has nothing to do with politics.
Right. Basically, culture is almost like, we talk about it as though it's like the skeleton of the organization through which everything else emanates. So you could be looking for things like, does my organization value teamwork? Does it value independent thinking and creativity?
Right.
So there are all sorts of things.
Philosophy.
Yeah,
Not political
exactly.
philosophy, but philosophy.
Like Cal Poly's learning by doing philosophy as the backbone. Students are attracted to it because they like experiential education.
But here's my question. Through the interview process, how do you get a sense of the culture of the company?
Thank you, that's a good question. You need to be looking for what are called artifacts, like things that you just see. So for example, if you want a very collegial environment, for example, and you walk by offices that are all closed, people have little things marking so you can't see inside their doors, people not walking into each other's offices, that says to you, maybe people are more isolated in this organization.
And for some, that may be preferable.
Right. Well,
Some people may want
exactly.
that.
Which is why it comes down to the fit in the first place. So look around.
The fifth point, generalizable skills. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Generalizable
Yes.
skills. What are generalizable skills?
Okay. So generalizable skills are those that are applicable to many different positions throughout an organization and arguably across industries. So arguably over time, you need to develop skills that can be used as you are promoted through an organization. And those are applicable to a lot of different situations, like problem-solving skills, analytical skills, the ability to present. So those are broadly applicable.
It's interesting. I feel like today, corporations, companies are trying to pigeonhole people.
Well, yeah, and the smart ones think, are we grooming people who could be fit into a lot of different positions into what, instead of what we call the silos, you know, just accounting, just marketing, because you need people who can fit with a lot of different areas and can think in terms of other people's perspectives.
The sixth consideration is relevant for some.
Exactly.
But it's important if you are one of those people, and that deals with additional education.
Right, because we know that some companies have programs in place for to help the employees become more promotable, and that is through attaining a graduate education. So they'll pay for it.
Right.
Right. So you have to think, do I owe additional time if I go to graduate school? And whether it has meaning to my longer term career. Because as you know, yes, a lot of people don't even care whether they're getting a graduate education.
Earlier in our discussion, you referenced the notion that some people will try to create competing offers.
Right.
I want to get a sense from you whether you think that's a wise approach. You know, we just talked about 2 or more enticing offers. If you have one enticing offer from an outside entity, should you work to get a competing offer from your internal entity?
Oh, that's interesting.
You see?
I would say if you're politically savvy about it, because you're right that maybe some of these elements are not present in your current job, but if you made it abundantly clear to your seniors in your internal organization that you wanted to be promoted to gain some more of this stuff, the challenge, the visibility, then it would behoove you to have a conversation with your boss about that.
What do you think about creating that competing offer? You know, I think about, I feel like if you push your current employer to provide you a better offer than the outside offer, if you don't take it, the internal offer, it really burns bridges. Maybe I'm wrong. What does the experts say?
Well, it could, and that's why ideally, it was a good question. Ideally, when you decide to leave, you have exhausted internal options in the first place, because you're right, it can be perceived as a threat. Like, oh, okay, I got a better offer outside, quote, give me what I want. So I would say work to the best of your ability to manage your internal career path. If it doesn't work out, be prepared to leave. And the 2 or more offers really has to do with people who are seeking 2 external offers.
I understand.
Because in that way, you get the latitude, you know, to choose because you've worked so hard to get them.
But one more question on the internal versus external. For some individuals, they may be under a contract, and the contract will come to a close after 3 years, let's say. In that instance, do you think it's wise to seek out that external offer to create 2 enticing offers?
Yeah, I think if you want to signal that you're truly committed to that organization and you feel very confident that you are going to receive the internal extension in the contract, I don't believe there's a reason to go outside of it. Because you're right, it could signal that you're truly not that committed if you say, oh, guess what, I went outside. So I think it's politically sensitive. And I think companies know if you're truly committed to them, so do send that signal if you want to grow.
Outstanding considerations, outstanding tips. We will miss you very much, but we congratulate you. She is going to Queen's University in North Carolina after a successful run at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Her name is Dawn Chandler. My name is Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching California Edition.